Greetings, YouTube. Yeah, I've warped your way back into the WGS Arcade. We're back with more time, Tenshi. And we're getting right up to the point where we have to make a decision. Michele wants us to make a choice that would greatly help her research. Something about the time paradox. Now, if you guys remember, in the current original timeline, Kenji's house burned down. His mom and dad died in the fire. But now we're kind of getting the hint that possibly, at the behest of Michele, that this was Kenji that actually did it. So I don't know if we have to make another decision. I know we had to make another decision last episode, which, again, we're going to, when we get through this first run-through, we're going to go back to that point and do the other decisions and see where the story takes us from there. But if this comes to a point where we have to make another decision, we're gonna do the exact same scenario. So, you know, if it gives us a choice to whether or not to burn down the house, we'll do one decision, and then after all that is done, we'll come back to like that point in the decision and do it the other way and see what happens. Your research is messed up, Michele. I know how it seems, Kenji. But what I'm doing is beyond who I am, and it is beyond who you are. Don't give me that! My hand clenched on the bottle, feeling its heat as the chemicals inside of it grew hotter from the flame. Don't pretend that you're better than what is happening here, Michele. Sure, I'm one person. I'm pretty insignificant when it comes to the future, but if I do this, I'll be a murderer of my own parents. And if I don't, I could possibly be committing suicide. You don't know that. No, I don't, but you don't either, Michele. We were silent, standing there, staring at my home. A figure walked out of it, and away. I deduced this figure to be me from 1 week ago. It was strange to even think about seeing myself from a different time, but it wasn't something I could ruminate on for long. Regardless of your misgivings, Kenji, this is your choice. Make it how you will. Either throw the bottle or don't. This is the last I will say about it. I just stood there for a moment thinking hard about the events of this week, how many horrible things that had happened, and all of the great things that had happened as well. Getting to know Rose and Kyo, even Mizuki and Bunny, it had been such a strange yet wonderful experience. If I threw this bottle onto that house, it would all continue. But if I didn't, it could all disappear. Ooh, okay. So, just as I explained earlier, we're saving it at this point. And we're gonna do both decisions. So, the first decision we're gonna do, we're gonna throw the bottle. Second decision we're gonna do, we're not gonna throw the bottle. So that way we can see both scenarios kind of pan out and see what happens. So let's go ahead and I know it's not an easy decision, but I want to see how both endings look. There are like several different endings to this game, and I want to see how they all look. I stood there for a moment thinking on my decision, on what was important, living in the past or moving forward, even with the cost in mind. I clenched my grip around the bottle before hurling it behind my head and tossing it at the building. It hit the side and sparked flames pouring from the shattered bottle. I turned and looked at Michele, who looked at me. A look at her eyes told me that I had to live with this decision. I had to watch. I turned back and watched as the flames spread. Slowly they crawled up from the lawn and the back of the house and across, slowly licking their way into the inner areas of the once happy home. I couldn't do anything at this point. I couldn't change my mind. All I could do was just stand there. I felt the heat whisk by my face in waves as the flame grew higher and higher, until eventually the whole home was engulfed. I could hear screams, cries. I knew who they belonged to. And with those sounds, I finally broke down. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing and shaking, the world spinning and the urgent feeling of needing to vomit. I felt a hand on my back, When I realized it was Michele, I whipped my head back, throwing her arm away from me. I stared needles at her. I'm sorry, Kenji. No, you're not, Michele. You brought me back here, and you gave me a choice. And I made it. Now tell me, is this what you wanted? Admittedly, Kenji, no. Well, good. I was infuriated, exhausted, and emotionally drained. I just wanted to go home. I'm glad you couldn't get the satisfaction and success with this sick plan of yours, Michele. I really, really am. Now do me a favor and take me, Rose, and Kyo back to our time where we belong. And leave me out of your cruel, messed up experiments from now on. Kenji, I didn't have this planned in advance. It just sort of happened this way. Bull! I don't want to hear any more of your excuses. Just take me to the lab and away from here. Now! We both stood there in silence, listening as the crackling of the wood and the fire in front of us got louder, roaring over the neighborhood. People have evacuated their homes and were watching, and I knew about this time I had gotten home from the short trip I had taken back then. Eventually the time window opened. Cries from inside the building had stopped. And I finally went through, ending up back in Tensei's lab. Kenji! Thank goodness you're okay. Tensei paused, looking over at Michele, his eyes burning with fury. I could tell he wanted to hit her in some way, shape, or form, but he thought better of it. Rather than that, he spoke to her in a low, cold voice that I had never heard from him before. Get the other girls back here, then pack your things and leave. You're fired. Gramps, you can't be. You abused the time window for your own cruel experiments and put my grandson in mortal danger. I lost enough for one lifetime, Michele. Now get Rose and Kyo back, and then leave us in peace. Whatever, Tensei. Your lab, your rules, or whatever. With those words said in a defeated tone, Tensei held me close for a moment, then led me to my room. My head was still spinning from what I had done. I collapsed upon my bed, still shaking as if it was all a fever dream, waiting for Rose and Kyo to make their return. A few days had passed. A lot had changed. Tensei told us that he'd likely be shutting the time window down, at least for a while, until he could find another engineer he could trust. Michele left, as she promised, and we never heard from her again. I sat in my room in the lab, Rose by my side consoling me, and Kyo on my chair. They were always there for me, and I appreciated their presence. Always. But something still felt wrong. I felt so hollow inside. Empty. What I had done had been so much more jarring than I thought it would have been. If I had risked it all, risked my own life, and all that was around me, would things be better? Is living with the grief that much worse? Rose held me close, consoling me still. Kyo sat there talking with us and left occasionally to go give us privacy. Rose left as well sometimes so that Kyo and I have some private time. I could tell Kyo things that I didn't think Rose would understand or would want to talk about, like the cruelty of time. She nodded and kept me company. I was happy to have them still by my side. If there was anything to take from this whole experience, I was glad to have kept these two by my side. It would take time and probably a lot of therapy to sort out the nightmares in my head. But with Rose and Kyo by my side, it could all be possible, I hoped. For now, I had to cope with my decisions, as evil as they may have seemed in hindsight. But what if you could go back and do things differently? But it's not over. Join the... Oh. Okay, so we're that close to the end of the game. Okay, so we're just going through the credits here. Okay, we still have a little bit of time left in the episode, so what we're going to do, we're going to go back to that point where we made the decision. And what we're going to do, what we're going to do when we come back. Well, you know what? Hold on. No, we're going to make the decision to don't throw the bottle. I stood there and thought of Kyo's words, of Mizuki's as well. About time being a river that we traveled along, changing whatever what was before would only alter what was ahead, right? As confusing as it was, I felt as if, for that brief second, that I didn't throw the bottle, and I didn't cause the place to burn down, that somehow, someway, everything would work out. I set the bottle down, looking at Michele sternly. I'm not doing this, Michele. Michele merely smiled, then picked up the bottle, grabbing a pitcher that was next to her and dropping it in, dousing the flames. I knew I could count on you, Kenji. Now then, when we go through the time window, things will change, so... Kenji, what's wrong? It's just, I feel weird, and... Ugh! A sharp pain hit my stomach and swirled throughout my body. I hunched over and fell to my knees, going faint. The sweat fell down my brow and my ears rang loudly. I could hardly hear Michele's words as I suddenly blacked out, the world disappearing. With that, Kenji vanished right in front of Michele's eyes. She merely stood there for a moment, mouth agape, then suddenly shook her head, stepping towards the white light that appeared nearby. That wasn't supposed to happen. Michele was awestruck as she stepped back through the time window, traversing back to the time with Kyo and Rose. She made it back to their lab, sensing the air around her was much more dense than before. Michele, what's happening? It's a prediction that I feared. The time we are currently in is collapsing, so our collective consciousness is also fading. In English, Michele. We are slipping into a different flow of time's river. We'll regain a fragment of our memories, but things will be different. At least I hope that's what is happening. Essentially, time itself is trying to fix the paradox we just created. So this timeline where we all exist with our knowledge is falling apart. So what does that mean for us? Michele smirked as she collapsed over. As she did, the clothes of all the girls slowly started disintegrating first, as they normally did when they were in a time other than their own. We're going home, girls. To a new home that's the same, but so much different. I promise you, everything is going to be And with those words, the world went black. For a moment, reality seemed to be an empty void, like a comatose dream that could never be woken from. But eventually, Kenji's eyes flitted open. Seeing the ceiling of his bedroom. His old bedroom. From his old house. What happened? I feel sick. I leaned over, thinking I might throw up. Holding a trash can in front of my face, I anticipated it, but nothing came. For a while, I just sat there, composing myself as the world stopped spinning. Where was I? Was I home? Was this home? I looked up and down. Yes, this was my old room in my old house. But it never felt old. It was just the place I lived in. Suddenly, there was a knock at my door. It cracked open. A sweet voice rang from the other side. Kenji, are you right in there? Your grandfather wanted you over at his lab in an hour or so. Mom? Yes, dear? Are you feeling well? You sound sick. I sat there, a smile crossing my face as tears began to well up in my eyes. I quickly wiped them away. I'm fine, Mom. Thank you. So Grandpa Tensei wants me over at his lab in an hour, then? Yes, dear. That was what he told me. Are you sure you're feeling all right? I can call him in. No, I'm fine, Mom. Is Dad home yet? No, dear. He's still working. He has an overtime shift today. He'll be done by 11 o'clock. What time is it now? Around 6. I was worried with how much you were sleeping today. All right, I'll be back home then. I suddenly lunged forward, embracing her and laughing. Goodness, Kenji, what has gotten into you lately? Oh, just nightmares, I guess. Really, Kenji? You're 18. I'm sure you can handle some bad dreams by now. I pulled away from her and dashed downstairs, making my way down through the door, but before I did, I called back up at her. You're right, I can. I'll be back home for dinner. I just gotta get to the lab. I practically did a marathon sprint all the way to the lab. Fueled by adrenaline and joy, I made a mad dash to the field where the lab was, which was surprisingly wasn't far from where I lived. Had it changed location, or was it always this close? I couldn't remember, nor did I care. Eventually, I made it to the entrance and pressed the call button. A voice rang out from the box.
State your business.
Grandpa, it's me.
Kenji?
There was a silence for a moment before the elevator dinged, the shutter doors swiftly sliding open, beckoning me to come inside. I practically jumped inside, pressing the lowest floor button, hopping up and down in my anticipation to see the lab. Finally, it dinged again, sliding open to reveal Kyo standing at the doorway. Before I could say a word, she tackled me in a hug, laughing and crying at the same time.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're okay! Kenji, we were so worried that something had happened, but at the same time we weren't, and it's just been so confusing for so long, but you're finally here!
Yeah, I am. We stared at each other for a moment before Kyo pulled it forward and kissed me, pulling back and smiling. I was a bit stunned, but smiled.
This way! The others want to see you too, of course!
Kyo took me by the hand, practically dragging me towards the lab and pushing the doors open. Inside was the whole crew, Michele, Rose, and Tensei. The monitor was even on, showing Mizuki and Bunny in their own time period.
So you made it out alive.
Michele walked over to me, sauntering with a smirk, before placing a hand upon one of my shoulders with a sigh. Good job, kid. You made me proud. Thank you, Michele. I'm sorry I doubted you. I don't blame you, kid. The plan was crazy, but I believe you made the right choice, all things considered. Now then, I already have another plan on the way. Let me just boot up the time window, and I'll set it in motion.
Seriously, Michele, already? Kenji just got here. He's lucky to still have his memories from the past.
I mean, even those are a bit fuzzy. The details may fade, but the important things are there to stay. You only lost a week, so the damage shouldn't be too severe. It's just nice to see you back, kid. Now then, time window. Kenji doesn't have to join, but I want to see if... Suddenly, a spark emitted from the time window. The picture on the screen fuzzed away, losing connection with Mizuki and Bunny. A low hum could be heard, an ominous noise that put me on edge, as well as everybody else in the room, even Michele.
Michele? What is going...
Before Michele could answer, the time window burst into a shower of light. Another Michele? Michele, who was standing closest to the window, screamed as if half her body was engulfed by its embrace, but before it could take her anywhere, the power surge ended, the window suddenly closing shut. Michele, caught in between our time and whatever the time window was set to, suddenly burst into light with the window itself, screaming at the top of her lungs as it did so.
Michele!
Oh gosh, Tensei, do something!
Before anything could do anything, a loud sonic boom knocked everyone over and knocked me out cold. Oh, my head. I stood, rubbing the back of my sore head. I looked around, seeing Rose and Kyo also coming too. Tensei stood next to me, helping me up as I regained my sense of reality. Grandpa, what?
Well, I'm afraid that with every action in time, there is a reaction.
No, you can't mean...
I'm afraid I do. Michele tampered with time. She tried to take control of it and used it for her own purposes. Good or evil, it didn't matter. I warned her about this. She shrugged it off. But time wanted to be sure that she never interfered again.
You're talking about time as if it's a sentient being and not just a concept, Tensei. Rose slowly stood, blinking harshly so her eyes could adjust to the light.
And at this point, my dear, I'm not sure what time is. All I know is that I have tampered with it long enough, with enough for my age. Michele knew how to use the time window even better than me, so I'm not sure what will happen now.
What about Mizuki and Bunny? What will they do?
They will find a way. I promise you.
Why don't you seem shocked at all by all of this, Tensei? Michele just died right in front of us.
I am very, very saddened by this, Rose, despite not having the composure of this attitude. She was one of my best engineers and a close friend, but I warned her of her actions.
You're not saying she got what was coming to her, are you, Tensei?
That's so cruel. Time is cruel in more ways than I can even imagine.
He walked away, heading toward the lab's exit.
You may know us, Kenji, but this may very well be the end of our adventures with the time window. No.
We all turned and looked at Rose, her hand clenched in the fist, tears streaming down her face.
Michele would have wanted us to continue. She would want us to use the time window and resume her legacy. Despite the consequences and the risk, I'm not going to give up on this, Tensei, no matter what happens. You've seen the risk firsthand. Yes, and I don't care. Michele died for this. And it wouldn't feel right to just throw it away.
Silence fell on the room once more as we stared at her. Tensei let out a deep sigh, saying no more. I walked over to Rose, hugging her as she wept softly. Kyo walked over as well, embracing the two of us warmly. As we stood there, a light emitted from the time window yet again. But it was different this time. We turned our heads and looked, and we were shocked by what we saw. Well, are you guys ready or what? We hope you enjoyed Time Tenshi, but... Oh, it's gonna leave us on a cliffhanger like that? Really? Really? Wow, Silver Cow Studio. Wow. Wow. Way to leave us on a cliffhanger. Way to leave us on a cliffhanger. So what we're going to do, guys and gals, we're going to go ahead and call it an episode. And when we come back to the arcade, we have to go back and make another decision. This time, I guess we're going to turn our heads towards Rose and see if the story pans out any differently. So with that being said, I'm your friendly neighborhood WrestleGamer, and I will see you at the next Warp Zone. Bye, guys! Ooh. Kyo turned to face me, her head slightly tilted down. She was blushing. Alright. Freeze! And you get obliterated.